for when the duke looked out he saw an immense number of soldiers who were drawn up around the palace. When the king's men arrived they came to a sudden halt and dared not advance. But the duke was not afraid. He went straight up to the colonel of the king's soldiers and asked him what he wanted. The colonel told him his errand. "It is of no use," said the duke. "You see how many men I have, and if the king will listen to me we shall become good friends, and I will help him against his enemies, and in such a way that it will be heard of far and wide," he said. The colonel was of the same opinion, and the duke then invited him and all his soldiers inside the palace, and the men had more than one glass to drink and plenty of everything to eat as well. But while they were eating and drinking they began talking, and the duke then got to hear that the king had a daughter who was his only child, and was so wonderfully fair and beautiful that no one had ever seen her like before. And the more the king's soldiers ate and drank, the more they thought she would suit the duke for a wife, and they went on talking so long that the duke at last began to be of the same opinion. "The worst of it," said the soldiers, "is that she is just as proud as she is beautiful, and will never look at a man." But the duke laughed at this. "If that's all," said the duke, "there's sure to be a remedy for that complaint." When the soldiers had eaten and drunk as much as they could find room for, they shouted "Hurrah!" so that it echoed among the hills, and then they set out homeward. But, as you may imagine, they did not walk exactly in parade order, for they were rather unsteady about the knees, and many of them did not carry their guns in regulation manner. The duke asked them to greet the king from him. He would call on him the following day, he said. When the duke was alone again he began to think of the princess, and to wonder if she were as beautiful and fair as they had made her out to be. He would like to make sure of it, and as so many strange things had happened that day, it might not be impossible to find that out as well, he thought. "Lars, my lad." "What are master's orders?" "Well, now you must bring me the king's daughter as soon as she has gone to sleep," he said. "But she must not be awakened either on the way here or back. Do you hear that?" he said. And before long the princess was lying on the bed. She slept so soundly and looked so wonderfully beautiful as she lay there. Yes, she was as sweet as sugar, I can tell you. The duke walked round about her, but she was just as beautiful from whatever point of view he looked at her. The more he looked, the more he liked her. "Lars, my lad." "What are master's orders?" "You must now carry the princess home," he said, "for now I know how she looks, and tomorrow I will ask for her hand," he said. Next morning the king looked out of the window. "I suppose I shall not be troubled with the sight of that palace any more," he thought. But zounds! There it stood just as on the day before, and the sun shone so brightly on the roof, and the weathercocks dazzled his eyes. He now became furious and called all his men. They came quicker than usual. The courtiers bowed and scraped, and the soldiers stood at attention and presented arms. "Do you see the palace there?" screamed the king. They stretched their necks and stared and gaped. Yes, of course, that they did. "Have I not ordered you to pull down the palace and hang the builder?" he said. Yes, they could not deny that. But then the colonel himself stepped forward and reported what had happened and how many soldiers the duke had and how wonderfully grand the palace was. And next he told him what the duke had said, and how he had asked him to give his greetings to the king, and all that sort of thing. The king felt quite confused, and had to put his crown down on the table and scratch his head. He could not understand all this, although he was a king, for he could take his oath it had all been built in a single night, and if the duke were not an evil one himself, he must in any case have done it by magic. While he sat pondering, the princess came into the room. "Good morning to you, Father," she said. "Just fancy, I had such a strange and beautiful dream last night," she said. "What did you dream then, my girl?" said the king. "I dreamed that I was in the new palace over yonder, and that I saw a duke there, so fine and handsome that I could never have imagined the like, and now I want to get married, Father," she said. "Do you want to get married? You, who have never cared to look at a man? That's very strange," said the king. "That may be," said the princess, "but it's different now. And I want to get married, and it is the duke I want," she said. The king was quite beside himself, so frightened did he become of the duke. But all of a sudden he heard a terrible noise of drums and trumpets and instruments of all kinds, and then came a message that the duke had just arrived with a large company, all of whom were so grandly dressed that gold and silver glistened in every fold. The king put on his crown and his coronation robes, and then went out on the steps to receive them, and the princess was not slow to follow him. The duke bowed most graciously, and the king of course did likewise, and when they had talked a while about their affairs and their grandeur, they became the best of friends. A great banquet was then prepared, and the duke was placed next to the princess at the table. What they talked about is not easy to tell, but the duke spoke so well for himself that the princess could not very well say "no" to anything he said, and then he went up to the king and asked for her hand. The king could not exactly say no either, for he could very well see that the duke was a person with whom it was best to be on friendly terms, but give his sanction there and then he could not very well do that either. He wanted to see the duke's palace first, and find out about the state of affairs over there, as you may understand. So it was arranged that he should visit the duke and take the princess with him to see his palace, and with this they parted company. When the duke returned home, Lars became busier than ever, for there was so much to attend to, but he set to work and strove hard. And when the king and his daughter arrived everything was so magnificent and splendid that no words can describe it. They went through all the rooms and looked about, and they found everything as it should be, and even still more splendid, thought the king, and so he was quite pleased. The wedding then took place, and that in grand style, and on the duke's arrival home with his bride he, too, gave a great feast, and then there was an end to the festivities. Some time passed by, and one evening the duke heard these words: "Are you satisfied now?" It was Lars, as you may guess, but the duke could not see him. "Well, I ought to be," said the duke. "You have provided me with everything I have," he said. "Yes, but what have I got in return?" asked Lars. "Nothing," said the duke. "But bless me, what could I have given you, who are not of flesh and blood, and whom I cannot see either?" he said. "But if there is anything I can do for you, tell me what it is and I shall do it." "Well, I should like to ask you for that little scrap of paper which you found in the chest," said Lars. "Nothing else," said the duke. "If such a trifle can help you, I can easily do without it, for now I begin to know the words by heart," he said. Lars thanked the duke and asked him to put the paper on the chair in front of the bed when he retired to rest, and he would be sure to fetch it during the night. The duke did as he was told, and so he and the princess lay down and went to sleep. But early in the morning the duke awoke and felt so cold that his teeth chattered, and when he had got his eyes quite open he found that he was quite naked and had not even as much as a thread on his back, and instead of the grand bed and the beautiful bedroom and the magnificent palace, he lay on the big chest in the old tumble down hut. He began to shout, "Lars, my lad!" But he got no answer. He shouted once more, "Lars, my lad!" But he got no answer this time either, so he shouted all he could.